Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Okay, please have our clerk, Jesse Clark, call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Lamsett, are you present?
I am present.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Franzen?
Present.
Councillor Braybrook?
Present.
Councillor Cadigan?
Present.
For staff, we have Donna Taggart, CAO Treasurer.
Present.
Steve Brockbank, Director of Emergency Services.
Present.
Dylan Kosh, Director of Recreation and Facilities.
Present.
Evan Grieger, Director of Public Works.
Present.
Barb Waldron, Director of Building and Planning, CBO.
Present.
Adele Arbor, Planner.
Present.
Bianca Dragicevic, Deputy Clerk.
Present.
Sarah Dillamarter, Junior Planner.
Present.
Amber Novak, Legislative Coordinator, Executive Assistant to the CAO.
Present.
Rachel Stark, Economic Development and Marketing Coordinator.
Present.
And Jesse Clark, Director of Corporate Services Clerk, is present.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that the proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and made available on the internet. We can move on to item 1.3 of our agenda, which is land acknowledgement and moment of reflection. We respectfully acknowledge that Trent Lakes and Peterborough County are located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa First Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nation, which include Alderville, Beausoleil, Curve Lake, Georgina Island, Hiawatha, Rama, and Scugog Island First Nation. Trent Lake respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain their responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We will now take a moment to reflect on these principles and our duties and responsibilities as members of council. Okay, thank you. We can move on to item 2 of our agenda, which is disclosure of pecuniary interest. If any member of council has an interest in an item on the agenda, please disclose it now or any time during the meeting prior to speaking on the item that you have a pecuniary interest in. Seeing no hands, we can move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda is circulated. Councillor Franzen for a mover and Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is adoption of the minutes. We have 3 different minutes to adopt. We can do it all with one motion, or we can discuss them in a motion for each one.
I'll move to adopt all 3.
Moved by Councillor Cadigan, seconded by Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Any conversation? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, now move on to item 5 of our agenda, which is committees and boards. We can move on to 5.1, which is liaison reports for council boards and committees. Does anyone have anything to discuss? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Lamsett. I do sit on the Buckhorn District Tourist Association. I just wanted to announce that they're having a Christmas get-together for their members December 4th at the Kawartha Winery. Also, to just let everybody know, the Welcome Center continues to be open throughout the year with reduced hours, and they're pretty active. They had about $10,000 worth of sales in the month of October, and they had visitors, 570 visitors. So they continue to be pretty active.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's nice when people come into our community, they have somewhere to go and get information. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Anyone else have any committees or boards? No? Okay. We can move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. I would need a motion to suspend our regular meeting and go into open meeting. See Deputy Councillor Braybrook for a mover and Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We are now in a public meeting. We can move on to item 6.1 of our agenda. And I think Sarah Dillamarter, our junior planner, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a public meeting under Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an amendment to the Municipality Zoning Bylaw B 2014-070 as amended. A notice of public meeting for today's applications containing the prescribed information was circulated to all landowners within 120-meter radius of the subject lands at least 20 days prior to this meeting, and a sign was posted on the subject land in accordance with the Planning Act. The notice was also mailed to all prescribed agencies, public bodies, and persons in accordance with regulations. Anyone wanting to be notified of any decision from today's public meeting must either inform myself or the clerk, and the notice will be mailed to them, setting out the method and manner in which appeals may be made to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Please note that if a person does not send a written comment prior to passing the bylaw or make an oral submission at a public meeting, that person may not be entitled to appeal the decision. This is a public meeting for file number 23-18 to consider a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by agent Tom DeBoer of TD Consulting Services Incorporated on behalf of the property owner 1586877 Ontario Inc. for the lot known municipally as 505 Bass Lake Road. The zoning bylaw amendment is required as a condition of provisional consent to file numbers B-144-22 and B-145-22, wherein the two newly created lots do not meet the minimum size or frontage requirements for the rural zone. Thus, the size and frontage of the newly created lots will be rezoned to conform to the provisions, prompting a requirement to have the lots rezoned to the rural residential zone, wherein the size and the frontage of the newly created lots will conform to the provisions of the zone category. The applicants have submitted a scoped environmental impact study in support of the application, and the county has said the peer reviewed study from the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority is generally consistent with the conclusions of the applicant's report, yielding no evidence of wetlands on the two newly created parcels. The applicant's submitted environmental impact study contained mitigation recommendations, which were implemented through a development agreement, signed by the applicant on the 15th of November 2023 and registered on title. There is a planning report attached to today's agenda in support of the proposed rezoning application. The planning report identifies that the application is generally consistent with the provincial policy statement and growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The application also meets the intent of the official plan. The Municipality of Trent Lakes has received comments from Peterborough Public Health stating that they have no objections to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The municipality has received comments from the applicant's agent with a request to speak at today's council meeting. Comments were received early this morning from the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority with respect to this application, to which I'll read out loud now. We have received the fee for the application. Please see below our recommendation for this application. We have reviewed the application and have no concerns with the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment as a condition of consent, file number B-144-22 and B-145-22, to rezone the two severed lots from the rural zone to the rural residential zone in order for the lots to meet minimum lot size requirements. The properties are completely regulated by Kawartha Conservation for steep slopes and may require the following studies at the time of permit. A geotechnical study prepared by a qualified professional demonstrates that there is no opportunity to relocate the building or structure outside of the erosion hazard, and that the building or structure will be located in an area of least and acceptable risk. There is no impact on existing and future slope stability, and the potential for erosion is addressed through proper drainage. The other one is erosion and sediment control and site stabilization or restoration plans. Please contact our permitting department for more details on the requirements for the studies before applying for permits. Please let me know if you have any questions. No further comments have been received from any other circulated agencies or neighboring property owners concerning the proposal. Further, if any members of the public do not register with the clerk indicating their intent to make an oral submission but would like to do so at this time, please either use the raise a hand feature online if you're in the virtual gallery, or physically raise your hand now so that we are able to promote you in order for you to make an oral submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the preamble and the introduction of the file, Sarah. Is there anyone in the gallery, either virtually or physical gallery, that would like to speak to this item? Go ahead. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Ed Leardam, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this today. I'm a resident on Bass Lake Road, not within the notification zone, but a few kilometers south of this property. And I'm going to say, I think, I support development in general in the municipality, as long as it's done wisely and takes into account our ecologically sensitive area. If this is the property I believe it to be, then I am familiar with the location, but not the property itself, as it is private property and I've not ventured onto it. In general, I have no objection to the zoning change request, but I have a few questions and observations. And there are a few discrepancies in the EIS report, again, I think, for clarification. So the first question I have is, or comment is, I and the neighbors around there, I've noticed a fair bit of work occurring there over the past couple of years. Heavy equipment noises, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if that is okay, if they've cleared their building sites already prior to getting their zoning change requests permitted and approved. So that's a question that I have. Hopefully that can be answered. Secondly, there's reference to disturbed area throughout the documentation, and I wondered what that is. What's the disturbed area identified throughout that documentation? Doesn't appear to be where the building lots are. So I'm wondering what's been disturbed and has it impacted any ecologically sensitive things around there? Wetlands, there's all kinds of flora and fauna, and it's that whole area along Bass Lake Road, along Nogies Creek, is a very sensitive area for many, many things, including endangered species of all kinds. So again, is this okay to have a disturbed area? What does that mean? In the EIS document, I was kind of going through it, and I had to go through it a couple times because there are a number of inconsistencies which make me wonder, is this the property that we all are looking at? Section 1.1 appears to correctly identify the property where it is located, fronting on the Bass Lake Road, quote unquote, fronting on Bass Lake Road across from the Muskie Sanctuary and Nogies Creek. And I believe that's correct. Section 1.2, the property is bounded to the south by Fire Route 117, to the east by Bass Lake Road, and the north and east by a forested natural area. No issue with that. But having said that, Section 2.1 refers to a lake. And I wondered where that lake is. Do they mean the sanctuary? Or do they mean something else? The final phase involved the preparation of the EIS with specific mitigation measures for protecting the lake. So again, what lake? Section 7.1.3 refers to a shoreline. Particularly along the shoreline is what it says. Again, shoreline of what? A lake that has been stated, the sanctuary that's there, I think. Again, that's why I say I think. I don't know what that property is if it's talking about a lake. Section 3, including the two appendices A and B, contains pictures and drawings showing the proposed severed lots and the shared driveway. However, one drawing shows a shared driveway north of the two lots. I don't know if you would care to look at that. It's north of the two lots being shared between the disturbed area and the two lots, which is the south arm of the driveway appears to cut across one lot to get to the other lot beside it. Yet the drawings in appendices A and B show the shared driveway between the two lots. So from the road, it's going up and it splits, and that's all you can see from the road. Now, is it going to the two lots, or is it going to one lot, the two lots here, and then the disturbed area there? So again, questioning sort of what we're referring to here. Section 3.1 says separated by a road, Bass Lake, quote unquote, is across the site on the northern end and Nogies Creek is across the southern end. Well, Bass Lake is nowhere near this property. It's about 8 kilometers further north at the end of, well, not the end of, but sort of where Bass Lake Road goes to. So again, where are we talking about here? I hope it's the area that we see in the picture across from the sanctuary as described in the initial section. So just wanted to point those out and make sure that we're talking about the same property. Again, I have no issues, or I'm not against having this development and this zone change happening. I just want to make sure we know what we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone want to take a stab at those 7 or 8 questions? Go ahead.
I don't, but the applicant Vanessa Archer is on the line and she may be able to answer
Okay,
if I unmute her.
sure, please do. Vanessa, where are you
Hi,
at?
yes, through you, Mayor. Thank you for having us today. I will take a stab at answering some of those. I couldn't catch everything that he was saying. I was trying to follow along and look at the EIS while he was pointing some of the things out. The first point regarding the disturbed lands, there is a dwelling to the north of these 2 lots, and I think that that's the parcel or the piece that is in the report being called disturbed lands. That is there and was permitted. So the other question regarding heavy machinery coming in and out of that property over the past couple of years, that is what that was for, was the house that is constructed north of these 2 newly severed lots that we're doing the rezoning for. The question regarding the driveway, there is a shared driveway that is accessing both of those 2 lots. So that is mentioned throughout the report and is shown in the appendix that was shown there. Just trying to pull up the report here while I'm talking on my computer. I'm just trying to think of what else he had pointed out there. And feel free to jump in and if anybody else caught the other pieces too.
If it was, where is the lake? What lake are we talking about?
So the lake is the sanctuary across the street. Like it's down south of the property across the road.
And it refers in 7.1.3 to a shoreline.
I would 7.1.3 again. I would believe that they're referencing the water across the street, the lake or sanctuary across the street. There are no lakes on the property, no water systems within the property. There are wetland pockets, but there is no lake or pond or anything like that.
All right, thank you. I don't know if there was a couple of other questions there. I don't know if they kind of got answered.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. Yes, most of them. Quickly, yeah, I'm still wondering about that shared driveway. Where does it go? Which 2 properties? Is it the existing building to the one side and to the other side? Is it to the 2 new lots, or is it between the 2 new lots?
Okay.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, it is referencing and on our site plan does show it is the 2 newly severed lots, not the one with the dwelling that's to the north. It does share between those 2.
Okay, thank you very much.
It is physically there and I have walked the property, so I do know that is the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? I'm seeing none. And did Tom DeBoers or is it Vanessa going to speak?
Yes, no, that would be through me. Thank you again, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for entertaining our application today. I really don't have anything additional to add. I just wanted to be here in case there was any questions from the public or from yourselves. So if there are any additional questions, please.
Okay, thank you. Council, does anyone on council have a question? I'm seeing none, Vanessa. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Okay. We can move on. We'll need a motion here.
Reconvene.
Need a motion now to reconvene our regular council meeting. The Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover and Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now back into our regular council. We can move on to item 7 of our agenda, which is business arising out of the statutory public meeting. In 7.1, Sarah Delamarca, our junior planner, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. There was a public meeting held for file number 23-18. At this time, staff are recommending that council receives the report from municipal planning staff and approve the bylaw attached to today's agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Prepared to make a motion here? I guess we'll do that later in the agenda. Great. Okay. Anyone prepared to make a motion? See Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
I will make the motion to receive the report and also to approve the zoning bylaw amendment that is later on our agenda today.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for the motion? See Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. We can move on to item 8 of our agenda, which is presentations. 8.1 is Mark, the Chief Administrative Officer of the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority, because I'm not even going to try your last name, and I've been told it several times. Did he run away again? Okay.
You scared him.
Well, he was in and out. He was trying to participate in another meeting, so we'll give him a minute here.
No, you can move on to Jane and you can
Okay.
come back.
All right, we can move on then, because I don't see Mark coming in. We can move on to Jane Colbert, Age-Friendly Coordinator of City of Peterborough. Would you like to come to the podium? Sorry, we jumped ahead to you. If you're not ready, take your time.
No worries, I'm good, thank you. Do as my presentation. Perfect, thank you so much. Do I need the mic? Is there a mic?
There's a mic.
Okay.
Yep,
Um,
perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to expand on how Trent Lakes fits into the age-friendly Peterborough Community Action Plan.
Next slide.
The purpose of the 2023 plan is to provide local government, organizations, and businesses direction on how they can contribute to an age-friendly community. Next slide. Just to define age-friendly community, it's one where policies, services, structures related to the physical, social environments are designed to support and enable older people to live in a secure environment, enjoy good health, and continue to participate in their communities. So often the actions will benefit the whole community. So the role of Age-Friendly Peterborough is to support and implement projects that result in the greater Peterborough area becoming more age-friendly. Next slide. The plan is a list of goals and strategies, and the work plan is a tool to track how the greater Peterborough area is becoming more age-friendly. Next. So when I reviewed the Trent Lakes Community Strategic Plan, I found many actions aligned with the Age-Friendly Peterborough Community Action Plan, and I will mention a few. Next. In regards to the strategy to increase housing options, in the Trent Lakes Community Strategic Plan, it states that there's a need to investigate bylaws to encourage housing diversity, especially to support the changing demographic needs. As it outlines, the number of older adults is increasing in the community, so I was glad to see an action to support the need for additional or diverse housing options. Next. Under staying mobile, we mention about accessible, inclusive infrastructure to support active transportation. And in the community strategic plan, it lists a number of actions that will be taken in order to support that. Next. Building relationships was important in both plans. It was mentioned often. There is a hope for us to build relationships as well as develop partnerships in order for us to have an age-friendly and more of a cohesive community. Next. Also under building relationships, volunteerism was mentioned. So I'm sorry, I've gone ahead of myself. With under building relationships, we want to engage older adults in the consultation of the plan. And this was also mentioned in the community strategic plan, where there was ways to engage older adults through non-digital means. And this was important. Next. Under learning and contributing, communication was very important in the Trent Lakes Community Strategic Plan, as it is also important in the age-friendly plan. So there was mention of creating accessible documents. There was mention on having a town hall on wheels to going to where people are, which I thought was very innovative. As well as making the newsletter more readable and more appealing. Next. Volunteerism was mentioned a lot, so through in the community strategic plan, and it's very important in the community action plan as well. We are involved with Volunteer Peterborough and have funded the website. So that is a place where people can list opportunity, or organizations can list opportunities, and people can list their profile where they can be matched with opportunities that fit their skills and their needs. Something that we can work with the municipality to be involved with Volunteer Peterborough. Next. Oh, the next steps are for Age Friendly Peterborough to be meeting with staff and community groups and organizations, so we can review the plan and discuss how their actions are contributing to an age-friendly community, and then also how Age Friendly Peterborough can support those actions. And many of those happen in Trent Lakes and with county residents. Next. Oh, my role is I work collaboratively on projects that benefit older adults and those who are in Trent Lakes as identified in the 2023 plan. I connect people so and share best practices. So whether that be from other municipalities within the county or in other areas of the province. I facilitate conversations with seniors, so I can assist the municipality in communication. And I identify and support funding opportunities. So if there was something that was listed in your community action, your community strategic plan, it may be something that I can work towards in have being funded through the ministry or other funding opportunities. Next. Oh, I'm here today to ask for support to utilize the Trent Lakes logo in our community action plan. And there's two ways this could be done. The first being that if the council does adopt the plan, that we would put Age Friendly Peterborough 2023 plan was adopted by the City of Peterborough, Peterborough County, all 8 townships, Curve Lake and Hiawatha First Nations. It has been approved by all others with the exception of Hiawatha, which is next week. The other slide that I use during presentations is I do mention about Age Friendly Peterborough being supported by the city, the county, the townships, the First Nations, as well as we receive financial support from United Way. So I am asking if you could adopt the 2023 Community Action Plan, and that I am able to use these in promotional material.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Does anyone on council have questions? See, Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
Just one comment, is a very good presentation. I don't think he had Oak Shores as a community center. We have 2 private community centers within the municipality and 3 that belong to the municipality.
That's a great point. Thank you. I was going by what was in the strategic community plan,
Yep.
and that's what it had mentioned. So I will make note of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor Brewer.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks very much for your presentation again. Thank you. Do you have a list of Trent Lakes initiatives or projects that were born out of the 2017 to 2022 AFP action plan? Do you have that?
I do not have that. I can share that with you at a later date. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I can share that with you.
Just on the heels of that question, do you simply, like I know Trent Lakes has a strategic plan and whatnot, and we as a municipality, we have our own initiatives that we do, deals with our aging population and whatnot, initiatives and whatnot. When the municipality takes that on their own, do you adopt, I guess, Trent Lakes' success on their own into your report?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. When we will do an annual update, which we call the impact report, and we will highlight the successes of how Trent Lakes has become more age friendly. And then at the end of the 5-year community action plan, so it's from 2023 to 2027. So in 2027, we will also highlight for the last 5 years.
Is the Peterborough Council on Aging responsible for implementing the AFP?
Peterborough Council on Aging is no longer. In 2017, when we created the community action plan, we rebranded as Age Friendly Peterborough.
Okay, so was the Peterborough Council on Aging responsible for implementing the AFP?
No.
At that time?
No.
Okay.
It dissolved at the time when the plan was introduced.
Okay. Yeah, just in my reviewing of the documentation and whatnot, it does state in your documentation that the PCOA was responsible for implementing the AFP. So
that was because the plan was written in 2016 for a release in 2017, and one of the actions of the plan was to rebrand in 2017. So it happened right after the release of that plan.
Okay. Are you able to share with me the roles and responsibilities of the 4 working groups that are contained within the action plan?
Sure.
Both the 2017 to 2022 and the proposed 2023 to 2027.
Yes, we have different task forces, and representatives from who lead each of the task forces. They come together at the working group meetings, and they share an update on, and then the working group provides strategic direction. And then they also plan for the year ahead. So for example, we have our learning and contributing working group meeting on Monday, and they are looking at the community action plan and what task forces will take on what project in the next year. So for example, we've identified communication and use of the internet as one, so a technology task force as a priority for next year. So at that meeting, we'll discuss who we're going to recruit for that task force and how we're going to address those issues. And one of those is internet for rural communities. And we've met with Nexicon, so it's things that you would be interested in.
Right, okay. Good. But again, you don't have any sort of information you can share with us today as far as how Trent Lakes, what the plan 2017 to 2022 plan how Trent Lakes fits into all that?
I can go back through the report card and have a look. I know, like, for example, through community care, they provide services. We've worked with the Buckhorn Community Center and we've offered programs there. We have our Be Prepared workshop, which we've done in Trent Lakes. We have our Senior Center Without Walls telephone activity program that is offered for Trent Lakes residents. We have, this is just me going off the top of my head as I'm going through. So we have our working group for basic needs is more of a round table. So it's those from health organizations who meet and discuss if there's any issues around health and how we can collaboratively address those through solutions. So there is representatives from Trent Lakes on that committee. Just going through in my head the other. Those are the ones that come to mind.
The spirit of the report, I understand, and I support that type of thing. It was more, and when I was reviewing it, it's more the meat of the report. And when you conducted your presentation September 19th, I just didn't see anything that benefited Trent Lakes. The report and the actions seem to be more concentrated around urban centric and that sort of thing. In both the 2017 and 2022 report cards, it states that there is and will be an increase in seniors aged 65 and over in the rural areas, with Trent Lakes being the second highest percentage in Peterborough County. In the report card of 2017, there was very little reference to any initiatives that were completed in the Trent Lakes area. Further, when I was reviewing the 2017 report card, as well as listening to your presentation of this report on September 19th, 2023, it was not clear to me what goals were realized under the strategic directions, proposed activities of the 2017 and 2022 action plan report card. I was hoping to see specifics, for instance, laying out the results of under each of the proposed activities, so as to offer the reader a wholesome and accurate reflection of what was achieved and to what extent it was achieved. It's difficult for me to assess any achievements generally, and more specifically, the benefit to our municipality, if any. This being said, it is equally challenging for me to see the vision for the 2023 to 2027 AFP action plan, due to the fact that it is built on the previous 2017 action plan, and I fear the result will be more of the same. My critique of the 2017 report card and proposed 2023 to 2027 action plan is by no means a criticism of all the hard work that you, Mr. Kowalik, and all the volunteers have put into their areas of responsibility, or the spirit of the document for that matter. I'm very passionate about addressing the health and safety of our aging community and the community in general, which is one of the driving forces of my being critical of the substance of the proposed plan and its lack of addressing the needs of a rural municipality, especially given the fact that according to the 2017 and 2023 action plans, that clearly state that an aging population is increasing in our municipality, greater than the city of Peterborough. So those are my observations and comments surrounding that. And as I say, I'll preface everything with people, the volunteers and whatnot. There's no criticism on that part. It's just I'm just apprehensive on. I know you're asking for us to sort of endorse or approve the report so you can use our logo and that sort of thing. But it's my position on the 19th was that I was prepared to receive the report, and my position hasn't changed today.
May I
Just
address
right
through
here,
you, Mayor?
please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I did do an Excel spreadsheet where I looked at the community strategic plan, so the Trent Lakes Community Strategic Plan, and I put the actions or proposed actions that were listed in that plan under each of the goals and strategies in the community action plan. So that's what I tried to highlight, a few of those without taking too much of council's time. And there are many actions that do align. So what the intent of the work plan would be is to your criticism of the 2017 to 2022 report card is we didn't have enough information. The plan was not structured in a way that we could report what the actions that weren't listed in the plan in the first place. So by having the framework like it is now, so for example, the champion and support an increase in housing options, what would be listed in our work plan would be investigate bylaws to encourage housing diversity by Trent Lakes, the municipality of Trent Lakes. So then at the end of the year, or even at the end of the 5 years, this would be reported on because it's in the work plan and it would say who's responsible for this action. So at the end of the year, they would provide an update on what has happened with the bylaws. So there are about 30 actions that I pulled just from your strategic community plan that fit within, that would be reported on in the community action plan, the age-friendly Peterborough community action plan, that would show that Trent Lakes is becoming more age-friendly.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lansett. Thanks, Jane. Appreciate that. First, let me set the stage. We are an older population. The median age here is 58. Fully 45% of our population is over 60. I think you can see from our community strategic plan that we are very focused on that group and understand that they have some specific needs as well as some shared needs. So we have already incorporated a lot of that into our strategic plan and some of our other plans, the economic development plan, for instance. So I, like Councillor Braybook, aren't hearing what benefit we get from supporting or approving your plan. It's a great plan. It's very high level. It's kind of motherhood and apple pie. Of course, seniors should be more social. Of course, they need transportation options. Of course, they need more connections. You know, nobody could argue that they don't. But I don't think, one, we're getting any direction from your group, nor do we want it necessarily or need it. And ultimately, we are left to develop our own action plan because the doers are right here. They're clearly not in your organization. So we respect the plan, we received it, but we're not, personally, and I think Councillor Braybrook are not prepared to approve it because we're not a part of it. It is really just a high-level strategic plan. We will be, in fact, working through and implementing our own plans with a focus on that particular group. So I think that's the bottom line, is we just don't see the benefit of it. Great if you can act as a resource for us. I like that. You can be a connector for us. You can do all of those things, but I don't think we're looking for direction. And even if we were, we didn't get it because there's nothing specific in the work plan that addresses Trent Lakes needs. So I think I'm building on what Councillor Braybook said and hopefully trying to elaborate a little bit more.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So then from what you've mentioned, then this would go on the plan without Trent Lakes, with no explanation. And what would that appear to the community, that Trent Lakes is not supportive of age-friendly projects? Then also with my resources and with doing like I mentioned, the projects that are already being done in Trent Lakes, in cooperation with, for example, the libraries or the community centers, without your endorsement, then what does that mean for the partnerships that we've already created in Trent Lakes that you're seemingly not necessarily supportive of? So that puts, I think, age-friendly Peterborough and the seniors that we represent, if you're not willing to, like, you would have a full page to say, this is all the great things that Trent Lakes does to support older adults. You would highlight that in the work that we do. But without your support with the plan, you would be not included with the other municipalities.
If I can just quickly respond to that. I think we're perfectly capable of communicating to our community what actions we have in place, what results we've got, and our community would look to us for that information. And we will continue, we have been doing that, we'll continue to do that. Again, I think the question that we continue to ask is, what value do we get from supporting or endorsing the plan? And, other than, a mention, I'm not sure that there's any tangible transactional benefits.
There are some that and like I said, I just did that community strategic plan and the plans that were mentioned in that document. But there are others, like, for example, enhancing access to health care to support older adults live their best quality of life, and that not being mentioned. So could be seen as a gap. And how could I bridge that gap through the connections that I have? And so that's where I see as the value. I'm one staff person who is not paid for directly by the municipality, and who can help support you working with the older adults.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor. Just to build on Deputy Mayor Armstrong's comments, I realize you're concerned about the optics of not having full buy-in for your plan. I understand that. I understand that. And Deputy Mayor's comments as far as what Trent Lakes is doing, and your comments about how is that going to look basically on Trent Lakes that basically doesn't support that. I mean, I don't know if I agree with those comments or the spirit of those comments, that if our logo and our support isn't on there, we're going to somehow suffer, and that shines a light on Trent Lakes, like they're not concerned about their aging population, when that couldn't be further from the truth. So I sort of take umbrage as to that suggestion. I know as Deputy Mayor mentioned, that we have a strategic plan that is high on our priority. And my critique and my observations and assessment of your plan is just that. It's my observations and assessment. How does anything in that plan benefit, other than the high level, as you mentioned, that it creates? It's almost like you've piggybacked what the municipalities are already doing, and you've created a document that now you can build into the document all the successes that all the municipalities have had when it goes to your document. And I just so that's basically my comment as far as the optics and whatnot. Our municipality knows that obviously we're concerned about our aging population and the processes that we put in place to address any gaps or needs. And I guess the question too is, prior to 2017, our access, municipalities' access to any sort of services that Peterborough may offer that the Trent Lakes could take advantage of, that's been in place. I mean, I think over 50% or a high percentage of our taxes go to the county. So that in essence gives us access to certain services. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Any other comments or questions? I'm seeing none. I have a comment. I just think that this is another opportunity for us to support our actions. I don't look at this as a negative thing in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure it's a very high level document. It's a way to share some best practices that we might not identify in our own strategic plan without making some mistakes. If you can work together and kind of meld the two documents and share all the information, I think that's a much better way to go. And to identify and support some funding opportunities, there's nothing wrong with us trying to find more funding opportunities because we all know we need them. This was another, that document will support what we do in 30 or 40 different reportable actions, which I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it could be very important to many of our ratepayers. Just my comments. And I am looking for someone that would be willing to make a motion. See Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Motion to receive.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Franklin?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any other conversation?
May
Go
I,
ahead.
may I ask about the use of the logo on page 5 of the plan?
Try to say that again.
The
Okay.
question was that to use the verbiage, the plan was adopted by the city of Peterborough, Peterborough County, all 8 townships, Curve Lake and Hiawatha First Nations with the Trent Lakes logo. Is there a support to do that?
So the motion was just received.
Okay.
If somebody wants to adopt it, they could make a second motion to that effect. But this first motion was just to receive it.
Did anyone, okay, we'll vote on that. Okay. We've had conversation. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay. Now, is there any opportunity for Age Friendly Peterborough to use our logo on a document? Go ahead, Councilor Brady.
Just through you, Mayor, my perspective is if you use the logo and the wording that's on there is basically what you've just presented to us, what we've made a decision simply to receive it and not approve it or adopt it. So by, allowing the Trent Lakes logo and the description in the box there, in essence, it's what we've been saying is moot. It suggests to the reader that Trent Lakes supports it and has approved it. And I think I saw the wording in there, approve, adopt. Well, we haven't adopted it or approved it. We've received it. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to make a motion to support that or adopt that? I'm seeing no hand. Okay, thank you very much. We will move on. Thank you very much, Jane, for your presentation. Really appreciate all the information.
Thank you.
If we can move on to, yes, we can move back to 8.1 of our agenda, which is Mark. I'm not even going to try to butcher your last name. Chief Administrative Officer of the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority. Please come to the podium and start your presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for accommodating my scheduling. I really appreciate that, so thanks very much. And good afternoon to the rest of council, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2024 budget for our organization and memorandum of understanding that we're proposing as well. I understand there's a staff report a little later in the agenda on this as well. And before I start in too far, I'd just like to recognize the member that you've appointed to our board, Councillor, my director, Peter Franzen. We have a very productive board, and just like to say Peter's a very valued member of that and a strong contributor. So definitely appreciate your appointment. And finally,
It's someone in the sky, just say next slide and it'll be done.
Just say next slide and it'll happen. All right. This is great. Thank you. So we're at the very beginning part of our budget process. So I'd say this is a very preliminary outlook at this point in time. We are going to our board in 2 days' time to deliver a draft budget. So it'll be before them. So it'll be the third step at that point in time that you see on that graphic. And so we're hopefully looking at a second draft in January that'll go to our board of directors. That'll be the end of January. And at that point in time, it'll be a 30-day circulation period to all of our member municipalities for comment. And all things going well, we'll be looking at a budget vote in March. So that's kind of where we are right now. And on the next slide, we have there we go. Look at that. We have some board direction that we're working with right now, which is 2.5% increase in municipal operating levy. That amounts to, in our budget, almost 43,000, which you see there, 42,883, due to apportionment differences that we're seeing that are supplied by the province. That's a 1.38% increase in your particular apportionment, which is about $1,000. On the next slide, we have a bit of a look at what our budget consists of. So the Conservation Authorities Act, as you might know, has been updated fairly significantly. It's been updated about 16 times in the last 5 years. So it's been pretty active. And so one of the key pieces is that what was before the main object and mandate of the authority was moved into the purpose of the Act, and the objects identified categories 1, 2, and 3, programs and services that a CA offers. And category 1 is what the province would deem mandatory. Category 2 is delivered on behalf or at the request of municipalities, and 3 is other. There's also a fourth category, which is called general in the Conservation Authorities Act, and that's business functions. The budget is now based on that, as you'll see it next year, and this is supported, of course, by other revenue sources that we have. So municipal levy is one component, but we look at grants, we look at program-generated revenues, and in some cases, deferred revenues or reserves. The next slide that we have kind of shows what that translation looks like. So before we had an operating levy, that's now worked out into 3 different categories of programs, each with their operating or capital sides as may be applicable in the year. Certainly all the time there'd be an operating. At times there would be a capital cost, potentially like a new building, for instance. And then we have the special projects and service agreements. Those are collapsed into category 2 programs, which are done at the request of or on behalf of municipalities. The next slide that we have for you is really just identifying some of the major elements of our budget that we work with. A lot of them are CA Act oriented this year as we work to translate that our previous budget to our new budget with that discretization that's identified. We actually had to recreate our entire budget, all the formulas in behind it. So it was a fair bit of work that we had to do this year. But also, same as everyone's been wrestling with, is inflation, economy, and what's available out in the landscape for grants. The next slide we have is really a quick summary of what our budget will look like for your municipality as we project out. So you can see there, that's the $1,001 difference. We have the category 1 and 3 general benefiting projects, which are split out amongst all municipalities. With the apportionment changes, there's actually a reduction in that amount. And you see there's a category 2 special project. That's a floodplain mapping, which on our end is taken off. I think it carries forward on your books for this year. And on the next slide, We have the general benefiting projects. So these are the ones that are split out amongst all municipalities. They're similar to last year. Digitization of records. So we've digitized about 300,000 records at this point in time. It's amazing how many records there are when you look at it. Look forward to that moving forward for another about 5 years. And then we have a 10-year environmental monitoring strategy as well that is looking at investments in our monitoring networks. And that's to convert, for instance, information that we collect right now manually, getting it real time so we can actually access it during flood emergencies, for instance, which just speeds up the time of response. Otherwise, we have to actually go to the gauge, download it, or do some other manual process. There's also some other additions that we're looking at on the tail end strategy, but it's all front loaded for the mandatory programs. The next slide that we have just goes into the floodplain mapping projects that we're doing for you right now. And it's really looking at doing floodplain mapping on the lower reaches of Nogeese Creek and Misquazibi. So we're excited to do that on your behalf. So we've been working diligently on that. And as you'll see on the next slide, there's a lot of work that we've been doing on collecting base information for these projects. So surveying structures, doing bathymetry work, those set the base for the engineering. And we have an RFP that's out, actually closed Friday, and we'll be letting that out very shortly. And then on the next slide, you'll see two diagrams there. This is kind of the progression of the floodplain mapping. So you can see we have staff that go out with survey equipment. They're on a structure there on the left-hand side. It progresses through to moving that into a digital realm. And verifying all the information. Those are all the cross sections that you see in there that helps build the engineering model. And those are the next steps as we go forward to having something on the landscape that's updated. So I think the last studies that were done were in the 90s. So it'll be based on new information, the best information available. The next slide that I have for you, and I'm going to transition a little bit to the MOUs. And the MOUs and the revised budget are all based on Bill 108 and the changes that we saw from that. That was the 2019 More Homes, More Choice Act that the provincial legislature put into effect. And we've seen regulations that support those changes over time. And the budget regulation, for instance, came into effect July of this year. So tied in with that is a couple of timeframes for the MOUs, and we'll move to the next slide, which shows how the which shows how the MOUs are generally structured in the regs. So we have a timeline that we're working with of December 31st, 2023. That's the deadline that the province has set for MOUs to be struck. And they really have, that's specific to the other category of programs. Those are the category 3 programs. And they do say as well in the regs that category 2 programs done on behalf of municipality, like floodplain studies, or even before that would have been an example, would have been natural heritage evaluations on planning applications, but that's no longer in effect due to Bill 39. So those would be examples of category 2 programs. Those generally have to have an MOU, but don't go on the same time frame. So it's really the category 3s that we're talking about. For the most part. I'll talk a little bit about our approach to combine those in a future slide. But I thought it might be useful just to show what some of the category 3 programs are like, just for your information. So you can see here, these are a couple of examples of that category 3 program. Those are done they are, as defined in the Act, it's determined by the board to be advisable to further the objects of the Act. So that's a mouthful for saying other things that are beneficial for our communities in general. And so you can see here we have a couple of special events, some education ties that we have, and it's a lot of the category 3s are really working with our community and connecting with them in a way that's meaningful for them, and generating interest in the environment itself, which then furthers some of the other work that we do. The next slide shows a few more examples. So we have special events, education, working with academia, which you can see there, doing some stream sampling, and there's a cross-country run, a fairly large run that happens in one of our CAs, as well as, funnily enough, reporting on our information. So that's not covered off as a mandatory, but we think is pretty valuable to have. On the next slide, just talk a little bit about our approach to the MOUs and agreements. So when we were looking at this, what we wanted to do is have absolute clarity on all the things that were in the mix. So we've highlighted what kind of, because we don't want everyone running back to the legislation, which although can be an interesting exercise, probably most people will refer to something else first. So in the agreement that you have in your agenda package, what we're looking at is clarity on all the programs, categories 1, 2, and 3, and making sure that there's breadcrumbs throughout so that you know what is being funded under each of those categories, and then tying in the budget process. The budget process already goes through a legislative process in order to make sure things are taken care of, and we didn't want to lose that in the MOUs, so we've made sure that that's in there, and I think works out well because council will see those budgets on an annual basis, and the agreement will be updated on an annual basis as a result too. So with that, let's move on to the next slide. And this identifies some of the specific clauses that are in the agreement. The legislation identifies, and you see the asterisks at the end of each of the points on, I think every point from the first, not including the first two, but everything below that. Those were all legislative requirements that were in the Act. So those are all contained in the drafted MOU. And you see that what we did add was clarity on the programs themselves across the board, 1, 2s, and 3s, and that budget process. We also attached our inventory of programs and services in there as well, which you would have seen over the last couple of years. And I would say it's a pleasure as well working with your staff to develop these MOUs. So they were extremely helpful. So thanks to Donna and her staff. The next slide that I'll just touch on is the 2023 highlights. So these are some of the things, some of our accomplishments for the year. We're proud of the year that we've had. It's been a busy year for sure, and there's a lot of information on this slide, so I'll just point out a few items. But on the administrative side, other than the CA Act compliance, which you see there's a number of different things that we did on that front, we had our very first asset management plan created. So it's something that we hadn't been managing our assets to a large degree. So this is something that we'll be forwarding on to each of the municipalities, and then there, of course, you have to manage the asset. So we're looking at trying to have discussions with everyone to make sure that the approach that we've taken makes sense. The other thing that we're doing is a pay equity and compensation review. It's the first time we've done that in about 5 years. First time we've done it with an external consultant. So looking forward to that. And thank you very much for Donna and her staff, again, volunteering to be a comparator for us. So thanks very much. In terms of community connections, I did mention some of the things that we're doing. We opened a disc golf course in order to bring in more people appreciating nature in ways that are meaningful to them. And we have 2 pictures there from our Fall Fest and Christmas at Ken Reed, which are tremendously popular, pulls in a lot of the watershed community from all over. We had our very first, I would say, big Fall Fest all one day instead of spread over a week, and we had 700 people come out. And Christmas at Ken Reed, in the worst weather we've ever had last year, we had 600, 700 people come out, which is great, and upwards of 1,200. So we're excited about this year. That'll be held on December 2nd. The next slide I have for you is a bit of a summary on our permitting performance. We did have some resourcing challenges this year. We lost our primary permitter, so that created some stress during our busy season. And we're through it. You can see in August we had a lot of permits issued as we're trying to put a big focus on that and make sure we're caught up. Happy to say we are caught up now, which is great. September, our results are looking what are we in? Actually, sorry, November, our results are looking right where we like to see them, which is hovering around 90% of those guidelines that we've actually reduced from provincial guidelines by about a third. The next slide I have for you is a little bit of information on improving our base and a little bit of reporting. So we know that weather patterns are changing over time, and we have our monitoring network, but we're not able to hit all the areas and be expensive to put in the same equipment to cover off the gaps that we see. So we've employed a citizen science approach to getting information. So we've outfitted a number of folks with rain gauges that are a little better than your standard, kind of cup that you get, and they record it on a regular basis, and we're able to use that information in order to figure out the weather patterns. So we're excited to use that. There's actually a couple in your municipality that contribute to this, which is tremendous. And we have a watershed report card as well. This is something that's produced every 5 years and rolls up all the information that we've collected in a easy to read, digestible format. So that one is an example of one of the category 3s programs. The other category. The next slide that I have for you is a couple of projects. It's a benefit being next to a municipality that's interested in protecting their lakes and are putting some resources towards that. So we have an aquatic plant control. It's part of a large NSERC grant. It's about a $500,000 grant that looks at shoreline techniques and in water techniques to control weeds. So there's some thrusters that were put in. You can see that's the left-hand picture there. And what the gist of it is that Trent Severn Waterway doesn't permit these officially as part of the permitting regime, but we know lots of people use them to control weeds. So this was looking at trying to fill that information gap and determine what the effectiveness of that technology is and what's the effect on all the other pieces, the biota, the water quality, for instance. So we're hoping this will result in better information so that these can be looked at as part of the permitting framework that they operate within. And the other item that we have up there is sediment and erosion control. So we do have a certified sediment erosion control inspector, which is really useful for looking at different construction sites. And the reason why we're interested in that is that the more soil that gets into lakes means the more weeds you get. So by preventing erosion from getting into your streams, your water courses, and then eventually into your lakes means that your lakes will last longer. And that's important, I think, for any shoreline owners that are out there or anyone that lives on a water course. So what we have here is a regime that we've kind of put in that looks at sediment erosion control, tries to put some science in behind it. And I think one of the most interesting things is that we're hosting a sediment and erosion control symposium on December 7th in Fenelon Falls, which is pretty close in the community center. So I've left an agenda that we've drafted up with your clerk. If you're interested in attending, just register and look forward to seeing you there. There's a number of interesting topics. I'll just mention a few of them, but identifying high-risk areas on construction sites, how to use filter socks or turbidity curtains, applying hydroseeding, and using drones for construction inspections as a couple of topics. The next slide, which is the last content slide I have for you, is we do collect information, and we think that information is useful, and we find it useful for what we do, but we also think it's probably useful for everyone else as well. And so what we're doing is we're moving to providing information to our communities online. And these are just two examples of a couple of dashboards that are currently active. And one is precipitation. So your gauge here, just in your back lot in your office here is one of the stations that are identified here. And so you can see the full data train, if you want to call it, the full data set for each of the stations, and can kind of work with some of the information within that. So it's really interesting use, and we think probably lots of other people can value from the information provided. And the other is another example of lake management plan that we're doing and providing that information to our community. So those are just two examples, but we're looking at biomonitoring and a couple other ones. Climate change is one of those as well. And the last slide I have for you is just a slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you, and to what we hope to do is make a difference in the community, and hopefully we have demonstrated that we're doing a few things that help out in that regard, and hopefully work with what you are doing as well. It's a cumulative effort of not only what we're doing, but your staff and their involvement in the work that we do, the community and our stakeholders as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Excellent presentation. Okay, does anyone on council have any questions of Mark? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Limstead. First of all, you had me at 1.38% increase of that. So thank you for that. We can probably manage that somehow or other. I had just two questions, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but what is your total budget?
Yeah, so that's interesting, because that number is one that we're working on as well with the draft budget. It's 4.1 is what our budget is.
4.1 million.
Yeah, 4.1 million.
Okay, ballpark's fine. I was just trying to get a sense of it. And the second question, last question, the floodplain mapping work that you're doing, any projections on when that might be, when the deliverable might come to us? I think, as everybody remembers, that's about something like 400 properties that will be not impacted by, but that will be considered under that study in both Misquisibi and the Nogies Creek area. So it's substantial in terms of our area and our population.
Yeah, so the floodplain mapping program, there's an agreement with the federal government and Ontario government on that, and I think that agreement says March 1st is when the technical deliverable has to be there. That's and there's a little bit of, I understand a little bit where usually it's March 31st, but this particular agreement says March 1st, so we're working to that end. Province said there's wiggle room in there as well, but that's the technical deliverable, and then there's other pieces to kind of clean things up as well. So one of the things that we usually do with floodplain mapping is let people know, and that usually happens after the technical study is complete.
Great, thank you.
But be rolled out from there.
Very good. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Braver.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks very much, Mark. I can sense the passion in your position. We, the municipality, we're embarking on assembling several committees the next month or two.
Yep.
One of them is the Environmental Advisory Committee. What role do you see, of course, KC playing in our particular EAC?
I can see, so I'll just back up a teensy little bit. We are on environmental committees for City Kawartha Lakes and for Scugog. So if it's similar to those, the structure of those committees, there's usually terms of reference that'll define kind of the scope of influence, and we would work within that scope. And if there's projects that come forward that are looking for support that we might be able to help with, then we would kind of further those discussions. So whether that be part of the municipal realm or something that we would do to advance a particular initiative, that would be something that we'd be open to. Otherwise, it's participation on the committee and contributing like any other valued member of that group.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions?
And did you want, I can expand a little bit more with an example from the City of Kawartha Lakes and from Scugog, if you want as well. So City of Kawartha Lakes was interested in bee-friendly and bird-friendly cities. So what we did was we partnered with them. We have a conservation authority, a conservation area, which is Ken Reed Conservation. It's our flagship conservation area, where lots of people come to bird. So what we did was we put up some signage. We applied for a grant as well, and we were able to work with that committee to implement that framework. They're also looking at some policy work. So we were able to input to that policy work on, this was longer grass as opposed to shorter grass. So looking at biodiversity as an example. And another one from Scugog is they have an environmental committee that's looking at one, improving the lake itself, which is it's called the Healthy Lake Scugog Environmental Committee. Close, not quite, but close. And that's looking at a multi-million-dollar project in order to improve the lake and look at some dredging and create a berm and create an aesthetic area for people. So it's tied to some stormwater controls as well, because most of Port Perry is not controlled because it's historic development. So that's one aspect. But another one, which is a smaller project, is there is an invasive species component that was identified at the Environmental Advisory Committee that Scugog has, and so they've asked us to do some work on that end, and that was I forget what the plant is. It's a bamboo type plant, Japanese knotweed, and so it's extremely aggressive, has a really strong rooting system, and it's so we're looking at eradicating that from the area.
Very aggressive initiative itself. Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions? I'm seeing none. Anyone prepared to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to receive Mark's report.
And is there more? Do we want to support that memorandum as well? Yeah, later. Okay, later.
Yeah.
I have a motion to receive the report. I have a seconder for that motion. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much.
Our community is becoming more bee friendly in my area, much to the chagrin of some of my neighbors. Because I don't cut my grass. Certain flowers or clover are bothersome. What that means. Thank you. Okay, we can move on now to delegations, which is section 9 of our agenda. Section 9.1 is Paul C. Hibbs from the Wildlife Biologist Consultant. Would you like to come to the podium and speak?
Greetings. Honorable councillors, Deputy Mayor and Mayor of Trent Lakes. My name is Ralph Baer and I'm here on behalf of the Haliburton Highlands Land Trust. I'm a board member and I'm going to give just a brief introduction to the main talk that Paul's going to give. Now, the Land Trust thanks you very much for this opportunity to give a presentation about a particularly unique conservation initiative called the Highlands Corridor. The Haliburton Land Trust is a non-for-profit environmental charity working with the core purpose of protecting the lands and waters of Haliburton County and surrounding areas. We do this through research, education and outreach, and land acquisition and stewardship. If you have questions about the Land Trust, certainly ask us after the presentation or visit our website, which is called haliburtonlandtrust.ca, okay, for a complete picture. Today, we, mainly Paul Hebben, are going to introduce you to the Highlands Corridor, one of the Land Trust's most exciting conservation and major initiatives. Paul Hebben, principal of Glenside Ecological Services Limited, is our expert project biologist and principal researcher working on the Highlands Corridor. He's going to provide you with insights about the Highlands Corridor concept, its ecological importance and significance for protecting natural areas, and why it has gained such significant support amongst a variety of stakeholders. Paul, by the way, has been doing research and monitoring work for a variety of organizations, including the Land Trust since its inception, so for 20 plus years. As mentioned, he's an expert biologist, rigorous scientist, and a thoughtful naturalist. Paul.
Well done introduction.
Thanks, Ralph.
Please go ahead and speak. We're honored to be in your presence.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So the Highlands Corridor, basically since 2007, I've been working very closely with the Haliburton Highlands Land Trust, and they were charged with sort of the mandate of trying to protect the important natural ecological functions and features in Haliburton. And that's a tough question. And so our studies into, and so I became very involved in that. And our studies into species of risk and wetlands and forests continually drew our attention to the southern part of Haliburton and the northern part of the county of Peterborough, and to an area that we're now referring to as the Highlands Corridor, which you can see there in the light green. We see the Highlands Corridor as a nature-based solution to building climate change resilience, protecting lands and waters, and maintaining biodiversity. And I want to really sort of drill down on why that is. Next slide, please. Oh. First and foremost, I think we have to talk about the natural infrastructure. We know that the natural environment provides critical services required for building climate change resilience. And first and foremost about that is really wetlands. So next slide, please. We started investigations into wetlands in the corridor, and to this end, we've actually evaluated and protected over 4,800 hectares of provincially significant wetlands in the corridor. Last summer, this last field season, we actually investigated another 1,040 hectares involving the Marigold Wetland Complex and the South Fortescue Wetland Complex. We've also digitally mapped all the wetlands in the townships of Lutterworth, Snowdon, and Glamorgan. And through that process, we've come to understand that the wetland representation in the Highlands Corridor is exceptionally high, 17.9%. Just to put that into context, that the eco-district, at the eco-district level, water is 11%. And so that includes lakes. And so what we're seeing in the Highlands Corridor is a really, really high representation of wetlands. Next slide, please. Thinking about the value of wetlands, we know the wetlands obviously provide us with climate change resilience in terms of flood attenuation. They have the ability to soak up and absorb water when it rushes out of our uplands in spring runoff. And that's a particularly sensitive issue for certainly the county of Haliburton, with severe flooding in 2013, 16, 17, and 19, and declaration of emergency in 3 of those years. I'd like to point out where the corridor is located. And if you see in that top corner picture there, it's in the red, and it's perched right at the top of the watershed, with the Trent Lakes right below it. And so the value, when you start thinking about that representation of wetlands and the value of those wetlands in terms of flood attenuation, the vulnerability of our communities, it becomes very, very, very inherent. Next slide, please. It's not just the flood attenuation, though. This particular wetland actually is found in the Kendrick Creek Wetland Complex, and it's kilometers wide and tens of meters deep of peat. And peat is just locked up carbon. It is just, if you can dry it, you would be able to burn it. It's actual carbon. And so you start thinking about the volume of carbon locked in that wetland. And any change in the hydrology or damage to that wetland will begin the release of that carbon. And so again, thinking back, 17.9% representation, you understand the significance of carbon storage in that landscape. Next slide, please. Carbon is not just stored in wetlands, of course, but it's also definitely stored in our forests. I love this slide. This looks like BC, but it's actually old growth in the Highlands Corridor. Next slide, please. Through our studies, we understand that the Highlands Corridor is about 71% forested, of which 75% is mature forests. I'd like to draw your attention to one particular forest, is the down right beside Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park. There is the Catchacoma forest, which is old growth, which is a stand of old growth, and located in the Highlands Corridor. Next slide, please. Another key function of the corridor is really connectivity and biodiversity. We know that maintaining biodiversity is crucial to maintaining healthy ecosystems. And we also understand that climate change is really going to stress our wildlife populations, whether it be through disease, insect infestation, drought, wildfires. All of these things are going to cause local extirpation. So we're going to have wildlife species disappearing from over here and possibly from over here. And the only way a species will be able to survive is if it can move across our landscape and repopulate those areas. And so in our past, our efforts have been trying to protect different habitats and maintain this habitat over here and maybe this habitat over here. But what we're going to see now moving forward is there is a real importance for connectivity. We need to ensure that these habitats are properly protected to ensure wildlife can move. And a species survival will depend on its ability to move across the landscape. Next slide, please. We know, thinking about where the Highlands Corridor is located at the provincial level, it's found right on the edge of the Canadian Shield in an area characterized by basically exposed bedrock, which you can see there in the gray. This area right along that edge of the Canadian Shield is really rich in biodiversity, and it's because it's the edge of two ecozones where we get sort of the diversity of the ecozone to the north and the diversity of the ecozone to the south. And some of the to the south, some of those species at risk that are associated with that ecozone are really pressed up against the Canadian Shield and into that area. And so it's a really rich area, one that's been recognized as a corridor extending from the Frontenac access right across to Georgian Bay. Not surprisingly, along that corridor, we see a number of protected areas already. We see in the dark green, all the provincial parks associated with that corridor. And then in the lighter green, some conservation reserves associated with that. The Highlands Corridor is located in the largest gap of protected areas in that corridor. And connects both Queen Elizabeth Provincial Park to Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park and Silent Lake Provincial Park. So it connects those three parks in that area. Just of interest, let's point out just south of the Bancroft, there's been a big initiative by Nature Conservancy of Canada to protect an area around the Hastings Junction, Wildlife Junction. That Wildlife Junction is the junction of the two corridors. The first being the Frontenac to Georgian Bay, this is where the Highlands Corridor is associated, as well as the Adirondack to Algonquin Wildlife Corridor. So the two recognizes the importance of that corridor. Next slide, please. In terms of biodiversity, our studies have found we actually now know that there are 42 provincially significant or species at risk, 30 provincially significant species, and 48 regionally and locally significant species to date. Our research continues, and we continually are surprised and find that much more. Next slide. This is just a graphical representation of where those species have been documented to date, and really is skewed to our efforts. We fully expect to see just as much biodiversity over to the east and just as much to the south, but we just haven't got there yet. We do have proposed field investigations in those areas, but not yet. Next slide, please. Both our communities, recreation and tourism, are vital components of our economic model, and maintaining healthy lakes and ecosystems ensures the sustainability of these industries. The Highlands Corridor speaks to that, maintaining healthy lakes and ecosystems. Next slide, please. So what I really want to highlight here is the opportunity. In the Highlands Corridor, we have 60,000 hectares. The whole corridor is about 100,000 hectares. Highlands Corridor, there's 60,000 hectares of crown land in that corridor. We know that the federal government is committed to protecting 30% of our lands by 2030. In Ontario, we've got 10.7% protected. To move that by 1%, we need to protect 1 million hectares. 1 million hectares, 1%. So we had a long way to go. We recognize too that opportunities are limited. It's easy to say, sure, protect a lot way up north, protect millions of hectares up there, but we need lands protected here to protect our communities, to protect our wildlife populations down here in southern and central Ontario. And there's not a lot of opportunity for that large landscape level of conservation. The Highlands Corridor represents that with 60,000 hectares of crown land. Next slide, please. Recognizing that crown land is somewhat fragmented still, even within that corridor, we see that private landowners are going to play a role in this for sure as well, or have the opportunity to. The Haliburton Highlands Land Trust is a private landowner, and to this end, they own 290 hectares of properties there in the purple. Snowden Municipal Park, another 190 hectares. But then we reached out to private landowners, and we sort of said, you know, this is our vision. do you have an interest in landscape conservation? Are you interested in participating in this project? And the response was phenomenal. We had, we immediately secured over 1,800 hectares of partners in conservation willing to commit to good stewardship on their property and help landscape conservation and connectivity. And so we're going to keep that program going and keep building and filling in those gaps. And that's what you're seeing there in the orange is our partners in conservation. And you can start to see how we can really knit this corridor together to meet the goals we're after. Next slide, please. So moving forward, our main objective now is to seek protection of the Crown land. We want to make sure that it is properly protected for the long term. And to do so, we're asking that the Crown land be designated as a conservation reserve. We're going to continue building partnerships with private landowners and promote good stewardship through our Partners in Conservation program. We want to find opportunities to work with stakeholders in government. We want to consult with First Nations to identify traditional uses and knowledge of the Highlands Corridor and continue our ecological research. Next slide. In February, we presented to the County of Haliburton, and the County of Haliburton passed a resolution of support of our efforts for protecting the Crown land as a conservation reserve. And to this end, they passed this resolution, basically supporting in principle that the Haliburton efforts, Land Trust, and their efforts to better protect Crown lands and waters in the Highlands Corridor. That was back in February. What we're asking today is that the Trent Lakes consider the same and pass a resolution of support for our project. Next slide, please. And that's it. Questions?
Cool. Thank you very much for your presentation. Does anyone on council have any questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Limestone. Thanks very much for the presentation. Very informative. Comment first, I think many of us understand that the most impactful and inexpensive way to deter, mitigate against some of the negative impacts of climate change is through natural landscapes. So it's sitting right there before us, kind of on a platter. So, you know, I'm really pleased that you've identified it and brought it forward. My two questions. First is, how does this intersect with the land between? Just so I can understand how those two.
It's very much in it. Very much in it. Yeah,
It's in it?
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
So land between is larger.
Yes.
But this is a small section of the land between.
That's right. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And the second thing is, I'm just trying to understand, I get that we want the government to protect their lands within this as a conservation reserve that has certain restrictions around it. I kind of get that we want landowners, private landowners, to enter into partnerships and agree to follow certain stewardship. But I'm just not sure what the vision for the whole larger property is. I just
yes.
Quite.
So Crown land
Yeah.
right now is resource based and can be sold and become aggregates, can become, commercial harvesting, right? The benefit of a conservation reserve level of protection is that, first of all, it maintains the recreational use of it. So that's why we have Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters on board, right? Because it basically protects that asset, protects that level. But it ensures that it will be protected over the long term. So it's below a provincial park, but it's above, certainly above just regular Crown land. And so that's the big piece. Now, it's not like the green belt, our vision, because the green belt actually puts restrictions on private land, and we have no intention of doing that. Our ask is for the Crown land be designated as a conservation reserve. Private landowners have the opportunity to participate if they want to be partners in conservation, and that's the model we're building on. So and then with municipal parks and our own land trust properties, it's a community gathering together to protect a large area. Is the bigger vision.
And just one follow-up or clarification. So I understand about 40,000 acres, hectares, not
hectares,
is private land.
Yes.
Have you scoped like how many landowners we're talking about?
No, I mean, there's lots of small, tiny properties as well, right? Our efforts so far have targeted the larger properties, the big bang for the buck, right? We have, what we do with private landowners, if they're interested, is we provide a management plan and enroll them in the managed forest tax incentive program. And so that's grant based. It's based on funding, how much funding we have. So it won't be, I mean, the way we'll knit it together is with that, targeting some of the bigger properties, avoiding some of the populated areas, because that's just not going to be effective. But that's, yeah, so there's lots of little small lots around lakes and things that wouldn't be obviously of much ecological value, but.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, I'm sure it's on your radar, is to sort of build that spreadsheet of, 80% of the land is owned by 2,100 landowners, just so you can understand
Right.
what the task before you is in trying to reach out to them and get them on board and sign
Yes,
partnership agreements. So it'd be nice to see that when you get there.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Armstrong, for your questions. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Brandon.
I have a couple questions. Do you have any native groups on board?
We have reached out to Curve Lake, Rama, and actually those two. And so we've started the formal consultation process, though in the end, really, it's not us. It would be, because it's Crown land, it would be provincial governments. But we're trying to initiate and get some dialogue going and that type of thing. So the efforts we've been putting that forward for sure.
And I would assume that it has no impact on hunting and fishing in that area?
That's right. So the benefit of conservation reserve is hunting and fishing is still fully allowed. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I just have one comment. Okay, Councillor Caddy, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. What industries do they want to limit, or are you looking to limit, like forestry? Is it aggregate resources?
Both of those under conservation reserve would not be permitted. That's right. So we've actually been working or have had lots of dialogue. It's all the licensing for forestry is with Bancroft and Forest Company. We've had a number of meetings with them, sitting down, sort of discussing, really trying to highlight opportunities. Are there areas of less interest to them? Unproductive forests, things like that. Sort of see if there's low fruit there. And so those discussions have started. Aggregates would be that would be out. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So through you, Mayor, again, comment. Are you having trouble getting buy-in from the province, because that's their stream of revenue is forestry?
We've had that process has actually been very fascinating for me as a biologist. But we've been very good success. We've been down to Queen's Park. So Laurie Scott hosted a reception down in Queen's Park. We had 55 MPPs and staff members there. Followed that with meetings with Minister Cassini at the time, and we were making good headway. We had some excellent discussions with senior MECP staff about it. They commended us on a well-balanced proposal, solid. So there's definite interest at that level. There was a cabinet shuffle. Cassini went over to Labor. And so now we're working with Camden and moving forward on that level too. Yeah. So lots of learning curve for me though.
Very much so. Any other comments or questions? I just have one comment about the land management, the forest management program that works very well for large properties that can get involved in that. It reduces some taxes through grant applications and things. That does work very well. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Mr. Mayor, motion to receive.
Okay, I have a motion to receive. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. That was
Very interesting.
And Mayor Limson?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to table a motion to have Trent Lakes also write a letter of support, similar to what County of Haliburton has done, which is to support in principle the Haliburton Highlands Trust in their efforts to better protect Crown lands and waters in the Highlands border.
Thank you very much for that motion. I'm not even going to look for a seconder because I would like to second it. Any other conversations from any members of council? I will call. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Braber.
Through you, Mayor, I'm in support of that motion. However, I'd like to see Councillor Cadigan's comments and question. I'd like to see sort of restrictions that you're looking at. I know there were two mentioned. I don't know if there's a list of restrictions.
So there is for conservation reserves, aggregates, commercial forestry are the primary differences, and that's it. I mean, it's so when Crown land is managed too, you see better protection of things like trails, for example. So existing trails can be used and continue to be used, but off-road mud bogging becomes, there's more enforcement around that. So things, it's just a better level of protection that way. But as I said, we've been through this with the Federation of Ontario Anglers and Hunters to ensure that their interests would still remain, and they're quite completely satisfied with that. So it's a good level.
So through you, Mayor, just to follow up to that, have you had any feedback from the forestry industry as far as what your proposed corridor is?
Absolutely, yeah. I've been in two meetings. We now sit on their stakeholders committee. I mean, obviously, it is their asset, right? And so they're never going to fully support it. They want to be, they would want to be part of that. It's taking away their assets and their licensing. That said, we know that of the 60,000 hectares, I think at the moment 20,000 is encumbered with forestry and aggregates. And so that's over the next 10-year term. We're looking at, again, some of the low-hanging fruits, like Milburn area is wetlands, blandings, turtles, and stunted white pine. Right, not a big area. That might be a good spot for sure. So building on that, also another thing too, in principle, the corridor is designed. The boundaries of the corridor are designed to capture an ecological function, and that is of connectivity and climate change resilience. The actual configuration of those boundaries will be decided through consultation and negotiation, and that's fully understood. We're not trying to say this has got to be this way. It's just the concept, the idea has to be protected, and so that's all part of the process.
Thank you, Marilyn. So just to comment on the motion, this is this is consistent with the request we have been making previously for the Ketchikan Forest.
Yes.
Which is part of this. So it's really in keeping with the support that we've previously provided. It's obviously expanding it to a larger area, though most of it is not even in our county. Most of it is in Haliburton. So the area that is in Trent Lakes includes the Ketchikan Forest and is a little bit greater.
Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if a copy of this motion could go to Haliburton County and to Port the Conservation Authority, because we were dealing with this topic as well, and I had it deferred.
Mm-hmm.
So we have dealt with it.
Is the mover okay with that amendment?
Absolutely. We should consider who else it should go to.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be widely distributed.
Yeah. We can amend that to be widely distributed. Is that
Perfect. Precise.
Okay. That is okay with the seconder as well. Okay. I will, any other conversation? Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just having clarification on the motion from Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Are you wanting the one on the screen in its entirety? Is that what you're moving?
I'm fine with it. Just substitute Trent Lakes.
Correct.
As opposed to Haliburton County.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and then the wording's fine.
Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay. Be safe out there if it's freezing rain.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes. Mike. Okay, we can now move on to 9.2 of our agenda, which is Gary Jaros, the president of the Capital Community Ratepayers Association. Assuming Gary is attending online.
Yep, and I'll unmute him now.
Yep, please do.
Good afternoon, Thanks to Trent Lakes Council for the opportunity to expand upon the comments that the Cavendish Community Ratepayers Association provided last month on the draft external communications plan. First off, wanted to again reiterate our opening comments that it was a very comprehensive plan. Want to thank Rachel and her staff team for putting it together. Also want to thank Rachel and her team for implementing many of the recommendations that came forward that she noted in her draft that is presented to council today. So thanks very much for that, because that will shorten my comments fairly significantly. So if you look at the document that we sent in, I basically want to focus on 6 items that we thought were important in the draft plan, and we have numbered them on there in red, and then talk about 4 of the recommendations, which are in green on the following page. So the first one was, obviously our recommendation for an executive summary, and thank you, Rachel, for doing that, because it does make the reading much better. In fact, this may be something that council may want to consider having staff do for all staff reports, because it does make it easier for councilors to read and for constituents to read as we go through them. They typically have backgrounders, which give you a look in the past of where this issue has come from, but doesn't typically give you the full executive summary, which is, okay, here's where we're at in the decision that we made, and then the detail to follow. So something that council may want to consider with staff to have executive summaries on all staff reports. As I sat through today's meeting, and I've been through other council meetings for other municipalities, there's a lot of use on consent agendas, and that is a big time saver for municipal meetings too. So just another thought there to look at the use of consent agendas to move through a lot of the, basically standard council by council meeting items rather than going through each of them in whole. Moving on to point number 2, public engagement. And we talked about the fact that there was no fulsome description of the public engagement, and we've even forwarded in a suggestion that came from Selwyn on that. And that obviously public engagement is opening your arms and saying great for some of the ideas, and that's good from that standpoint. But I do want to differentiate between public input and public engagement. Public input, as we've seen in the past, surveys, public meetings, and on average, it looks like less than 1% of the population is providing input into those meetings. We've seen them for the strategic plan. We've seen them for other activities and other projects that have gone on. And so obviously part of this plan is to get better input from the public on these things, but public engagement is completely different. And it's something that you really have to walk the talk. You can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the talk, which means you have to have open arms and you have to actively seek out the skill sets and those individuals in the community that Trent Lake staff and council could leverage and could use to make breakthrough progress on a lot of the key files that you have. And so public input is entirely different than public engagement. Public input, town hall meetings are public input. It's great, you get input. This is kind of public input when we send comments in. Public engagement is using the assets in the community to make Trent Lakes better. And I think a great example of that was the Ratepayer Association meeting this summer. Moving on to point number 3, key performance indicators. Obviously very key. How do we measure success? How do we know that we're making progress? I see in the new revised report, there are some qualitative and some quantitative measures. Ideally, we'd like to see more quantitative measures, but we can talk about that a little bit later on. It's really key that there's a lot of quantitative measures in there so that we can measure the success. Rather than just kind of doing it on a qualitative basis where you could debate till the cows come home whether you're actually making any progress or not. Point number 4, social media. We talked about that. There is a heavy reliance in the plan on social media. It's a known fact that, yeah, there's people on social media. There's also a lot of people who are not on social media. I know there are counselors who are not on social media. I'm not on social media. There's a lot of people who don't want to be on social media. So we just have to make sure we have an equal balance there when we look at the communication vehicles that we use. Point number 5, thank you again to Rachel and her team. They've now said there is no differentiation between seasonal and permanent residents, and obviously new people into the community are important. And then the last point is number 6, implementation of this plan. And one of our recommendations is, in addition to the resources, what are the priorities? How are we prioritizing them over a 2 to 3 year plan? What are the feedback loops? Thank you again, Rachel, and to the staff team. They did put an implementation plan. They've mapped it out over 3 years. That's excellent. With the implementation of KPIs, obviously there has to be a feedback loop. So how do we then get that information back that we are achieving or not achieving KPIs? And so that really concludes the comments that I have. So again, thanks to Rachel and her staff team for implementing a lot of the recommendations. Moving on to our recommendations, which we have notated in green. Again, I know there was 109 survey responses or people interviewed. Again, across 11,000 residents, it's still like 1% of the community. So, you know, and again, this is another thing that we should be looking at when we engage consultants and ask them for public input. Council should be asking staff to direct the consultants that they have to meet a minimum percentage of public input. So in other words, you can't just have a ticky mark, I got public input because I had 3 people, you know, respond to a survey. We should be telling those consultants they need to have at least 5%, 7%, 10%. You know, we don't want to get too aggressive, but we should be putting that in every RFQ that goes out where people want to come in and do work on behalf of Trent Lakes, and they're going to get public input. We should give them a criteria that they must hit in order to validate it as public input. And that's why we asked to send the communication plan to the constituents. We know from the past that when we sent a survey out in the tax bill, we got a 40% response rate on that. We know when we regularly send out surveys via the internet or on the website, we get less than 1% to, you know, kind of 0.5%. So there is value in getting that. We know there's a cost associated with it. This is a critical component of the strategic plan. It's also one that we've invested money in back in 2019 when we had the letter M create the communication plan. So when we look at a direct mailing being $7,000 or $8,000, it really is immaterial to the cost and the importance of communications in the community. Moving on to point number 2. Because communications, again, is a critical component of the strategic plan and is one that admittedly we know requires some improvement, we're saying, why not set up a small ad hoc working group of residents who have communication expertise? You know, in the last couple of months, I've talked to more than one person who is a vice president of communications for large corporation, people in public relations, et cetera. There's a lots of skill set out in the community. And they can provide feedback on the communication plan. They could also be a great resource for setting up those KPIs, and frankly, could help with the implementation plan and give some guidance and maybe refinement to the implementation plan. So really, when you look at constituting small working group, you effectively can achieve 2A and 2B, which is prioritization, next steps, and key performance indicators. Part of the report comes in as funding, no implication. Because this is a critical component of the strategic plan, I believe there should be a funding or a budget line item for communications in the upcoming budget. for a number of reasons. Why it's critically important. We know we're not getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And so the spend of money on communications, even if it was in the 5-digit range, would be insignificant and immaterial to some of the dollars we're spending on other projects in the township. So this is one that I think we need to look real hard at putting a line item budget in the 2024 budget for communications. Another example of that would be to fund things like the association ratepayer meeting, which frankly is no different than, I would say a community grant, because when you look at the association ratepayer executives, they are elected by constituents in Trent Lakes, no different than council is, to represent them with council and in the community. And so when we look at the 24 organizations that are in Trent Lakes, we are effectively, when we're getting in those meetings, representing the vast majority of the constituents in Trent Lakes, whether they are seasonal or permanent. And in fact, this year, as you know, we had the communication meeting with the association and ratepayer executives. In fact, in the morning, there were a number of association executives who attended the morning, couldn't attend the afternoon, and said it was the first time they'd ever attended the meeting because they'd never heard of it in the past. So these are very important meetings, and why I think there should be a budget for them. There was a cost associated with the meeting this year for that facilitator, $3,200. This was something that we had suggested to council, and the motion that was approved by council, R 2023-352, talked about that meeting and said that the use of a facilitator was at the discretion of the mayor. We all agreed to use a facilitator. Mayor Lambshead and Deputy Mayor Armstrong were in attendance at the meeting. We provided the report of the meeting, staff, council, and all of the associations got a copy of a very excellent report that really talks to how those assets in the community could be engaged as a phenomenal way of public engagement in the community. So that kind of wraps up my comments. What I'd like to propose to council is that a motion be made to put a line item for communications in the 2024 budget, and that motion approve the payment of the facilitator for the association ratepayer executive meeting that was held in September. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary, for your presentation. Does anyone have any questions of Gary? Seeing not a question. Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
Motion to receive.
We have a motion to receive. Do I have a seconder for that motion? I see Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. Thank you very much, Gary, for your presentation. Greatly appreciate it. Okay. We can move on to item 10 of our agenda, which is staff reports. And point 1 is public works, we have none. 10.2 is recreation facilities, we have none. 10.3 is fire emergency services, we have none. Building and planning, I do see your fire chief in there. I don't know if you've had any. Okay. Building and planning 10.4, and we have 10.4.1. Sarah Delamarter, our junior planner, would you like to speak to this item?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go
could
ahead.
we have a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. We are going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay, sorry for the extra couple minutes there. We are moving on to 10.4.1 of our agenda, which is Sarah Delamarter, our junior planner. Would you like to speak to this file?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On today's agenda, there's a municipal appraisal form for consent files B-68-23 and B-69-23, submitted by agent Tom DeBoer of TD Consulting Services Incorporated on behalf of the property owners Shane David Quibell and Juantia I butchered that, I apologize, Marie Quibel, for the property located at 380 County Road 49. The application does not appear to conform to either the Trent Lakes official plan nor the Trent Lakes Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw B 2014-070 as amended, as the proposal aims to create 2 new lots fronting upon an unopened municipal road allowance. The frontage was incorrectly noted to be along Moonline Road. Moonline Road ceases to be maintained where Branch Road meets Moonline Road, and the proposed 2 new lots are located several kilometers north of this intersection. Staff were informed that there is currently a trail leading up to the properties, but there does not appear to be any agreement in place for the trail's existence on the unopened municipal road allowance. The intent of the Trent Lakes official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw is that rural lots front upon and gain direct access to an improved public street, as per section 4.12.1 of the comprehensive zoning bylaw and section 6.2.1.4.3 of the Trent Lakes official plan. Section 6.2.1.4.1 of the Trent Lakes official plan states that new lots shall only be considered when both the newly created lot and the retained lots front upon an assumed public road that is currently maintained on a year-round basis. In this case, only the retained parcel would front upon a maintained road. Section 6.2.1.4.3 of the Trent Lakes official plan states that lots that front on and obtain direct access to roads that are not municipally maintained, any newly created lot and the retained lot must be prohibited from any kind of residential development. Staff have reviewed the application and recommends that council does not support the proposed severance application. Should the severance application be approved, staff recommend the following 3 conditions. 1, that $1,000 cash in lieu of parkland fee be paid to the municipality. 2, rezoning of the separate parcel to the satisfaction of the municipality. The R plan will be required as part of a complete ZBA submission. And 3, an agreement is to be entered into between the applicant and the municipality and registered on title at the applicant's expense, which would require upgrading of the unopened road allowance to a municipally maintained road at the sole expense of the applicant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Does anyone on council have any questions? I'm seeing none. Okay, is anyone on council prepared to make a motion? Mr. Francis, go ahead.
I'm prepared to make a motion to deny.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? See Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Is there any conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on to 10.4.2. Sarah Delamarter, our junior planner, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On today's agenda, there is a municipal appraisal form for consent file B-78-23 submitted by property owner Robert John Philpott for the property known municipally as 1430 County Road 507. The applicants are proposing to sever the existing 4.9 hectare or 12.1 acre parcel into 2 lots. The severed is proposed at 2.2 hectares or 5.4 acres with approximately 106 meters or 347.8 feet of frontage along County Road 507. The retained parcel is proposed at 2.7 hectares or 6.67 acres with approximately 91 meters or 298.6 feet of frontage along County Road 507. Both the severed and retained parcels conform to the comprehensive zoning bylaw B 2014-070 as amended, as well as the Trent Lakes official plan. Staff have reviewed the application and recommend that council supports the proposed severance with the condition that $1,000 cash in lieu of parkland fee be paid to the municipality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah Delamarter. Does anyone have any questions? I'm seeing none. Is anyone prepared to make a motion?
Make a motion to support.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. We can move on to item 10.4. 10.4.3 of our agenda, which is Sarah Delamarter, our junior planner. Would you like to speak to this item as well?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On today's agenda, there's a municipal appraisal form for file number B-79-23 submitted by property owner Catherine Cheryl Pearson for the vacant lot on Galway Road. The applicant has applied for the creation of an easement over their parcel to legalize an existing access in favor of the neighboring parcel known municipally as 1062 Galway Road. The application maintains the general intent of both the Trent Lakes official plan as well as the Trent Lakes comprehensive zoning bylaw B 2014-070 as amended. Staff have reviewed the application and recommend that council supports the proposed severance. Staff are not proposing any attached conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, I see Councillor Trent.
Motion to support.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Braybrooke for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, we can move on to item 10.4.4 of our agenda. Sarah Delamarter, our junior planner, would you please speak to this item?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On today's agenda, there's municipal appraisal form for consent file B-88-23 submitted by agent Jim Baird on behalf of the property owners Roger Arnold Harrison and Kimberly Ann Ball for the vacant lot located on Tully's Road. The applicants have applied to create a right-of-way over lands owned by Harrison and Ball in favor of the vacant lot owned by a Mr. White. The creation of the right-of-way would recognize an existing access to the subject lands. The application maintains the general intent of both the Trent Lakes official plan as well as the Trent Lakes comprehensive zoning bylaw B 2014-070 as amended. Staff have reviewed the application and recommend that council supports the proposed severance. Staff are not proposing any conditions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. Anyone on council have any questions? Seeing no questions, is anyone prepared to make a motion? See Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and I've seen Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We can move on to 10.4.5 of our agenda, which is Sarah Delamarter, our junior planner. Would you please speak to this item?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On today's agenda, there's a municipal appraisal form for consent file B-95-23 submitted by property owners Paul Douglas Walter Madden and Linda Diane Foster for the vacant property located on Spur 2. The purpose of the application is to approve a lot addition in favor of 15 Spur 2. The vacant lot contains a deficient lot area required in the shoreline residential private access zone, which will be further affected by this proposed severance. Due to this, a rezoning of the retained parcel will be required by the municipality to recognize this new deficiency in lot area. Both lots are registered under a plan of subdivision, Plan 15 lots 3 and 4, and thus a deeming bylaw will be required to legally facilitate a merger. The applicants own both of the lots in question. The application, maintains the general intent of both the Trent Lakes official plan and the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Staff have reviewed the application and recommend that council supports the proposed severance with the following two conditions. 1, a rezoning of the severed parcel to the satisfaction of the municipality. An R plan will be required to be submitted. And 2, a deeming bylaw is to be obtained for the subject lands to facilitate a legal merger of the severed lands with the benefiting parcel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone on council that have any questions about this application? I'm seeing Councillor Braybrooke, go ahead.
I'll just make a motion to support with staff conditions.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? I'm seeing Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Was that a seconder or was that a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Sarah Delamarter for, I could have recorded a little bit of, kept repeating myself. Okay, we can move on to 10.4.6 of our agenda, which is Adele Arbor, our planner. Would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor Lambshead, this report is in regards to acquiring the services of a registered professional planner to represent council's position at the Ontario Land Tribunal concerning a zoning bylaw amendment application 21-08. Staff are recommending that council receive this report from the planner regarding the registered planner selected to represent council at the OLT proceedings for information purposes.
Thank you very much. Anyone have any comments or questions? Seeing none. Is there anyone? Go ahead, Councillor Braber.
I'll make a motion to receive.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much again. We can move on to 10.4.7 of our agenda, which is Adele Arbor, our planner. Can you please speak to this item?
Yes, and thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. This report essentially reflects the presentation made by KRCA this afternoon, and staff are recommending the following. That council receive this report from the planner regarding the memorandum of understanding between the Municipality of Trent Lakes and Kawartha Region Conservation Authority, and further that council authorize staff to execute the MOU with Kawartha Region Conservation Authority for the delivery of municipally requested services, and further that council approve the 2024, and I'd like to add a draft KRCA budget as presented this afternoon. Mark had indicated that it was just the draft budget that still has to go to their group.
Okay, is there any comments or questions? Seeing none. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion in support, including the draft budget.
Councillor Franzen, go ahead first. Anyone for a seconder? See Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. I think, Mark, I've heard you several times say how to pronounce your last name. Krowski?
Myhowski.
Myhowski, that was it. Thank you very much. Okay, we can move on to item 10.5 is finance. We can go to 10.5.1, which is Donna Taggart, our CAO treasurer. Would you like to speak to this item, please, Donna?
Yes, thank you, and through you. Just the accounts payable for the month of October for council for information.
Okay, any comments or questions from council for Donna? I'm pleased to see that we're doing lots of electronic stuff again, so that's very nice. It saves a little bit of effort maybe. Thank you for that. Okay, anyone prepared to make a motion?
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor. You ain't ring.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Motion to receive.
And I have Councillor Braber for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on now to 10.6 of our agenda, which is administration. Rachel Stark, our economic development and marketing coordinator. Rachel, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, and through you. Before you is a report regarding the latest draft external communications strategy. Following the September 19th council meeting, when the initial draft was presented, staff accepted public feedback on the draft plan until October 31st. Feedback was gathered and certain suggestions were incorporated into the strategy. Overall, the feedback for the draft plan was positive and minor changes were suggested, which are reflected in the report. Attached to the draft strategy is an implementation plan that provides suggested timelines for completion of each action item over the next 3 years. The current draft external communication strategy ensures that the Municipality of Trent Lakes communication practices will become more effective, relevant, clear, and engaging between the public and municipal staff and council. The recommendation is that council receive the report for information and further that council approve the external communication strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rachel, anyone on council have any questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Lambshead. I do have a comment. several comments. First, I want to thank staff for all the work in developing this plan and thank the members of the public for their input. I'd like to remind everybody that there now have been 4 distinct opportunities for the public to provide input. First, in 2020, the consultant Letter M conducted best practice interviews, one-on-one interviews, and 2 focus groups. And based on that, they delivered their report with recommendations to improve communications and strengthen public engagement. Second, in June of this year, our communications specialist benchmarked communications and engagement practices in other municipalities, invited comments from the public, conducted a survey of the public, and held one-on-one interviews with interested members of the public. Third, based on all of the input to date, the draft communications plan was published and the public was invited to comment on the draft. The input that was received was considered, as was previously mentioned in the delegation, into the development of the revised draft we've seen today. In November, 1 week ago, the revised version of the communications plan was published and the public, for the 4th time, was invited to provide feedback. I'd like to suggest that any member of the public with an interest who wanted to be heard has been heard. The municipality created a communications specialist position to lead our efforts to strengthen communications. A qualified and capable individual was hired. In my opinion, it's time now to approve the plan, empower our communications specialist to do her job. We invite the public, as always, to provide feedback on how well we execute the plan. But at this point, to stop debating the wording in the planning document. So with that, Mayor Lamstead, I would like to make a motion to receive the report and approve the external communication strategy.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Would I have a seconder for that motion? I see Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Rachel Stark, our Economic Development and Marketing Coordinator, for all the efforts in this document. Okay, we can move on now to 10.7, which is corporate services. We can go to 10.7.1, which is Bianca Dragicevic, our Deputy Clerk. Can you speak to this item, please?
Thank you, and through you. Before you are the council expenses for the remainder of September for council's approval and authorization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bianca. Okay, anyone, any comments or questions? I'm seeing none. Anyone prepared to make a motion? I see Councillor Cadigan.
Motion to pay.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any other conversation? None. I will call for the vote. All in favor? All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, we can move on to item 10.7.2. Bianca Dragicevic, our Deputy Clerk, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, and through you, staff were directed at the October 3rd council meeting to get public feedback on the draft terms of reference for the Environmental Advisory Committee and the Heritage Advisory Committee. Staff reviewed all the feedback received and tried to incorporate as much as possible into the terms of reference. A summary of the changes as well as a red line version of the documents have been included for council's consideration. It should be noted that a list of topics have also been outlined in the report that staff felt may be better suited for the committee to consider as part of their work plan or as an agenda topic rather than forming part of the terms of reference. Staff's next steps, should council support the proposed terms of reference, staff are anticipating that the applications for recruitment for the committees would be open on November 22nd following this meeting for approximately 3 weeks with a tentative submission deadline of December 13th. It is anticipated that the appointments could be made at the January 16th, 2024 council meeting, and that the first meetings of the committees would be planned for February 2024. So at this time, staff are recommending that council receive the report and that council support the terms of reference for the EAC and the HAC, and further that council direct staff to proceed with recruitment for both committees with the establishment and appointments to be made at a future council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bianca. Do you have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I just had one. I don't mind 2 councillors being on each one of the committees, but I am concerned if we are going to strike further committees in the future, that we'll be boxing ourselves in.
Okay, thank you
Just a
very much.
comment.
Thank you very much for your comment. Councillor Franzen. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, is anyone prepared to make a motion? See Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
I'll make the motion to receive the report, to support the terms of reference for both committees, and further to direct staff to proceed with recruitment for both committees and with the timeline that was suggested.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a seconder for that motion? See Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, excellent. We have some committees on our horizon. Okay, we can move on to item 11 of our agenda. Correspondence for information. Does anyone have any correspondence for information? Seeing none, we can move on to item 12, which is correspondence for action. We have item 12.1, which is the community center. I don't know if someone wants to speak to this or we just have a discussion amongst ourselves. It's the Buckhorn Festival of Arts support letter request.
I'd make a motion in support.
Okay, we have a motion in support from Councillor Franzen. We have a seconder, Councillor Cadigan. Any other conversation?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it really is an important event within our community and that we should give it our wholesome support.
I do agree. Go ahead.
And just for the audience, there's no financial implication to this. This is just a letter of support.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could win a nice provincial award.
Yes.
With our support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Go ahead, Councillor Cadigan. Before I call.
Was this letter already sent because there was a date attached, November 20th?
I'm not sure if we sent the letter, but I think they had an idea that it was coming. Call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We can move on to item 13 of our agenda, which is bylaws. And item 13.1 is bylaws on the agenda memorandum. And Jesse Clark, our clerk, could you please speak to that? Hi.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lambshead. There are 3 bylaws on today's agenda that didn't have a corresponding staff report or public meeting. The first is B 2023-96, a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with Ewart O'Dwyer for professional legal services. B 2023-98 is a bylaw to authorize the execution of a lease agreement for the Kinmount Medical Center. And B 2023-100 is a zoning bylaw amendment for file 2314, for which a public meeting was held on September 19th.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. We can move on to the other 10.2 to 10.5. We can do them all at one time, or we can do them individually at the discretion of members of council. Okay, Councillor Braber.
Motion to approve 13.2 through to 13.5.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that motion? See Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? See none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on to item 14 of our agenda, which is business arising out of a previous meeting. And Dylan Kosh, our Director of Recreational Facilities, would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a follow-up to our meeting that we had on the, I believe it was the 8th of November regarding the Deer Bay Hall. Council heard one proposal for a potential future use for the Deer Bay Hall. Staff at this time are looking for direction on whether or not council wishes us to proceed with meeting with this group and engaging a professional architect to do some concept drawings and Class C costing to include for our 2024 budget deliberations.
Okay, thank you very much, Dylan. Does anyone on council have any comments or questions? Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
I just have a couple of comments.
Sure.
First of all, I don't want to sell the hall, or that's my feeling. But I don't think that we can enter into a proposal at this time because of the costing. We just don't have the money. And I know it costs us money to maintain it, but I'm sure that isn't something that we would, if we were to sell it, that we would withdraw from our recreation budget. So I don't know how you say that it costs us much. They'd be doing other things. Instead of cutting grass there, they would be doing other things. It wouldn't be a cost saving.
Any other comments from members? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lindsay. This is a tough one. We've framed it almost in a binary way that a decision not to proceed with Deer Bay Hall is almost a decision not to support Galway Historical Society, which is not the case. So I think we need to separate those two things.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly supportive of, continuing to support and look for property for the Historical Society and whatever other emerges from our Heritage Advisory Committee. Personally, I would really like to sell off Deer Bay Hall. It does cost about $27,000 a year to maintain it, so I don't know that it couldn't be a cost savings if we stopped doing that. We know that the building has asbestos in the attic. We know that it has lead in the paint. We're told that that's okay as long as we leave that intact and any renovations wouldn't affect that. We also know that renovating that property would be anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 in the face of also looking at replacing many of our critical infrastructure. It's also 7 kilometers from Buckhorn. Whatever we put there is not going to attract the traffic we have through the lock on the Trent Severn. So I just don't think it's a wise decision to keep that property. So my vote would be for us to proceed and sell it.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Trent.
Yeah, even though we don't put any money into it now, we could always start to build up a reserve fund for a heritage center. And so that in the future we have funds for it, because we obviously don't have any funds available for a major project in the near future with all of our infrastructure funding.
Councillor Cadigan.
Through you, Mayor Lamstead, I would be in support of selling the building as well. I think that we're looking at realistically at least $500,000 to convert it to something usable for the Historical Society. We're trying to make a silk purse out of the sow's ear when we could take that money and build something from the ground up. We have properties available to do that. So I'm also in favor of selling.
Thank you very much for your comment. Councillor Brayberg, any comment?
Yeah, I do. I'm sort of, I support Councillor Franzen's idea of keeping the property. I know we had a previous meeting surrounding that, and my rationale was, I mean, we can split hairs and do a kilometer, 7 kilometer radius from Buckhorn. My opinion is, my rationale for wanting to keep the property is, it's 2.5 acre property. It's still an asset. And the cost to the proposed, I mean, we're just throwing out numbers. We don't know the actual cost. The two estimates that Dylan and his staff provided was anywhere from $190,000 up to close to $400,000 for renovations. So let's just go at the high route of, or the high mark of $400,000 to renovate that property. I realize it's a cost, but also if you renovate the property, it can provide an existing location for our greater Harvey Historical Society, as well as other potential uses. I mean, as I mentioned, it's 2.5 acres. And I know from living down here and attending the dump, which is, I think it's a kilometer away from the Deer Bay School, there is a lot of traffic. And I don't think the proximity would be a hindrance to or a detractor to anybody attending that location. And it, possible uses, you could have festivals there, you could have historical events, you could have, food truck, you could have all sorts of events that could attract people from the downtown core of Buckhorn and Trent Lake. So, and I look at it, down the road, it's still an asset. If it seems that the money that was spent to renovate and it wasn't working out, then it's still an asset, and it's basically a turnkey at this point to sell the property. I just fear that we sell the property now. We put it into whatever reserve, whether it be the Heritage Advisory Committee reserve. Now we're sort of, okay, we've got the money in the bank. Now we're sitting back saying, okay, what properties do we have that we can build now? Now we're looking at, so we have however much money, let's say 500,000, you sell the Deer Bay Hall. So that's 500,000 property to develop. We don't know what properties we have. That hasn't been presented to factor in to any sort of decisions, whether to keep it or sell it. I don't know what properties we have that would be suitable location-wise and suitable in general to build a hall. And we'd be looking at a minimum of $1 million to build a specific building or structure. I mean, that's my lay interpretation of building costs, but it just seems like we're in a hurry to get rid of a property. Yes, it's $27,000 a year to maintain. It just seems like we're in a hurry to get rid of an asset with no real solution of, having a location for a historical society or otherwise. It could be multi-purposed, that property. So my long-winded diatribe, I'm in support of keeping it, getting some updated costs as far as renovating, and then maintaining that asset. And down the road, it's not like we're throwing money away. We're investing money into an asset that if it turned out years down the road it didn't work out, then we're still selling an asset that's basically turnkeying up the code. So that's my.
Thank you very much for your comments. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Lamson. Obviously, we have some divisive opinions here. I'm going to take the hardline financial approach and say we've got plenty on our plate that we need to spend our money on from a capital perspective going forward. And again, I don't want to make this a binary decision. Historical Society has a home or not have a home. I want to look just at the asset and make the motion that we proceed to sell it so that we don't continue to incur $27,000. Doesn't sound like a lot. Could be a contractor to enforce short-term rental. It could be, any number of things. So I'd like to put forward the motion that we have been talking about this for 3 years. I know it's only this term, but we have been talking about this for 3 years. And I think Councillor Cadigan is always good at making succinct comments, but I think his trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear was very pronounced. So that's the motion on the floor.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? Before we call for the vote, I would like to make a couple of comments. You can build as many buildings as you want, but you can't build a historic building. That building's well over 100 years old in parts of it. There is no way you're going to build something that's going to suit a historical society any more than that building does. The traffic that goes by there on County Road 36 is substantial. There's active transportation going by there all the time, every day. If you drive out 36, there's hundreds of cyclists driving by there. It would attract a lot of attention. you know, it will need some fixing up. Yes, absolutely. But it is a suitable site for something to start. We don't know what they need yet. So my first idea would be to ask what they need. And once we find out what they need, if it's something that's out of the realm of reality, then we don't proceed with it. But if it is something that's realistic, that we can get a price on doing, then you proceed down that path. We have a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. I will call for the vote.
I'd recommend a recorded vote.
Sure, you can, absolutely.
Good for the vote.
Call for the vote. Hand it over to our clerk.
Councillor Franzen, are you in favor?
No.
Mayor Lamshead?
No.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councillor Braybrook?
No.
Councillor Cadigan?
Yes.
That motion has failed.
Okay. Is anyone else prepared to make a motion to give some direction to our staff? Go ahead, Councillor Bray.
I'll take a stab at a motion. Motion that council receive the report. Does it have to be a new one, or can I piggyback off of this existing? Okay, the council received the report from the Director of Recreation Facilities regarding Deer Bay Hall proposals, and further that council directs staff to obtain a Class C costing to renovate the Deer Bay Hall to bring it up to building code.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just a comment on that. If we're talking about something that incurs dollars, then I think that should be deferred until we have our budget meeting next week. If there is something that doesn't involve dollars, that's fine. But I think we certainly don't have the money for it this year. So we'd be talking about spending money for that next year. So I think that would have to be something brought forward as a budget request next week.
I think you can continue with your motion. It will cost money, but it doesn't have to be in 2024 or 2025.
Okay, so generally, could I ask that, or could I add that friendly amendment from the Deputy Mayor to defer this to 2024?
Yep, that's reasonable. Okay, so are we going to ask what we need for the Historical Society first and then get our ideas from that? Or are we just going to bring it up to standards? Because it could be quite a difference. That could be part of your motion. Just a suggestion. I'm not making a motion in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through as far as Dylan's initial recommendation. Because I think the conversation has been, do we keep it and fix it up? So to me, that's okay. Let's get a costing of how much that is going to be. Let's get an estimate of how much that is going to be. And then it could be revisited if there's something found. Well, that's if they do that. But I'd like to get a costing on like an estimate prior to moving forward. So I don't know how I would.
You can make it that simple. Well, it could be that simple, right?
Okay. Okay, so council received the report and council directs staff to obtain an estimate as to the improvement of the Deer Bay Hall.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead. I was going to ask Dylan if you would like to comment on that.
If I could, for like I think maybe Terry was alluding to there, bringing it up to standard in my interpretation of that is bringing up a shell of a building to what is current building code. Are we talking about that, or are we talking about bringing up the building to meet the needs of the Historical Society? Some clarification on that would be great.
Well, I think, I mean, if if the needs of a historical society or any other society into a building, that building has to be up to a certain code for it to be inhabitable. So I'm not even thinking of the GHHS, I think we're putting that before, let's see if the building's suitable. Let's get a costing, an up-to-date costing. We have 2 historical quotes. I'd like to get an up-to-date quote. I mean, if it's exorbitant and it's ridiculous, then we could revisit it. But I'd like to at least see what today's numbers would be to renovate. And when you renovate, obviously you have to go through the building department and other sort of requirements. So bring it up to usable standards. So nothing to do with the Historical Society at this point, because I mean, it could be housed for something else, but I just want to get a quote on, similar to the previous 2 that we had, just get an estimate.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Lambert. I'm being a little provocative with this question, but we have 2 historical quotes between 200 and 400,000. So I guess my question, Councillor Braybrook, would be, what's too much? If it comes back at 500,000, is that acceptable? If it comes back at 800,000, is that acceptable? Like, where's the cutoff? We know we're looking at about $20 million at least just to replace our existing infrastructure. So how much are we willing to incur to renovate this building?
No, and that's a great point. I would say cap it at 500,000. And I know there were thoughts of, other properties that were available. One in downtown Buckhorn, which is the canoe place that's up. That was floated as an idea, and that's in the mid 800,000s and that sort of thing. So I mean, I don't want to. I would cap it at 500, and that's even high. And I don't know how accurate the 2 historical quotes were. In reviewing the reports from the 2 previous quotes, there were things noted in there that may not have to be remedied and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm operating on 2 historical reports or quotes with numbers that, it may, let's go the high number, 400,000, maybe more than that. I don't want to spend, our money, the municipality's money. I would cap it at 500 if it's.
Councillor Franzen has one more comment.
No, I'd like to second the motion.
Okay.
So that we can discuss it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I agree with Councillor Braybrook. I would like to take baby steps where we bring the property up to a standard that's safe for people to go into and proceed from there. And I agree, like my maximum would be right between $400,000 and $500,000.
Depending on the end use of this, there could be some grant funding. This is not something that the municipality may have to fund all of it anyway. We could qualify for some grant funding through the province.
Just another comment, albeit the 2 quotes that came in, like the higher one at 400,000, that's a document that provides you with what needs to be done. Now, as far as the costing, I mean, are we able to have people within our municipality, our trades within the municipality, similar to what was done at the Buckhorn Ice Rink, that they donated their time or whatever else to bring the cost down. It's a community building, so like I don't want this to be a carte blanche. Like if it's just here's the quote, it's 450,000 to do it. Okay, well, is there an opportunity to save, cut back in that 450,000? Like I don't want this to just be a, yeah, we want to keep the building. We want to pursue possibly renovating it, but what are the costs? So that's there is a stipulation to that or a caveat to that.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a seconder. We've had conversation. I'm going to call for the vote.
Can we have it recorded?
Yes, I think.
I'm also just going to get clarification that it's to receive the report and direct staff to get Class C costing to renovate the Deer Bay Hall to be habitable.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe you want to tag on there, subject to budget approval?
Yes.
Through you, Mayor. Just for Class C, it might be expected to have to do some preliminary concept drawings to achieve a Class C. If we're looking for a Class D with a higher variance, that can probably be based on like a square foot, dollars per square foot type number. Just wondering which level of accuracy council is hoping for.
I have to leave that to the guy who made the motion.
Yeah. Dylan, I mean, I'd like to, like I'm saying Class C, like I know what it means. So if Class C is, over and above, what is the minimum, the most minimalist assessment or hope that we can get for improving it? And then we can have further discussion and then move on from that. So I'll leave that to you, Dylan. What is the minimum?
Through you, Mayor, Class D would be the least expensive for council to obtain a price. Generally, it would be considered a dollars per square foot figure, plus or minus like 25 to 30%. You start getting down into a Class C, you might be looking at that, plus or minus 15, 20%.
Okay, so that's Class B, Bravo?
D as in Delta.
Delta, thank you.
But like I said, with a Class C, they typically want to do some floor plans and elevations.
Right.
I don't know what we're doing.
So, yeah. Is there a Class F? Sorry.
Not to my working knowledge, but there could be.
Provide some levity in this, and I apologize for my lay experience in this area. All I know is I would reword that to Class D Delta as opposed to Class C in the motion.
And Councillor Franzen, are you okay with that? Okay. Okay, we've got a revised a couple times motion. We've discussed it. I'm going to call for the vote and I think it's going to be recorded. Go ahead.
Did Deputy Mayor Armstrong ask for the report?
I did, please. So I get to go first?
That means you get to go first. Councillor Armstrong, are you in favor?
No.
Councillor Braybrook?
Yes.
Councillor Cadigan?
No.
Councillor Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lamson?
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Okay, thank you very much, members of council. Good debate. Okay, we can move on to item 15 of our agenda, which is notices of motion. Anyone have a notice of motion? Okay, we can move on to 16, which is information items. Anyone have any information items? Go ahead, Councillor Braybrook.
Through you, Mayor. Just wanted to just announce that the Santa Claus Parade last weekend, last Saturday, was a resounding success. Thanks to the Lions Club and former Mayor Clarkson and her efforts and the Lions efforts. Last year, I think there was 22 or 23 floats, and this year there were close to 30 floats and many hot dogs consumed. Not by me.
Thank you very much for all members of council that attended that. Thank you for the information. Okay, we can move on to item 17 of our agenda, which is closed meetings, which we have none. On to item 18 of our agenda, which is business arising out of a closed meeting, which we have none. We can move on to item 19 of our agenda, which is the adoption of the confirming bylaw. Item 19.1 is that bylaw. Anyone prepared to make a motion? Okay, Councillor Franzen. Through. Councillor Cadigan is a seconder. Any conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We can move on to item 20 of our agenda. I'm going to wait a little bit. It's almost 4 o'clock. And that's adjournment. We need a motion to adjourn. See Councillor Cadigan for a mover. You want to stick around? Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. I will call for for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council. Thank you, everyone in the galleries, virtual and physical.